Hello everyone, Simon Jacobson here. Another episode of Meaningful Live. Why are we so divided? How to create a United States. United States. This program is dedicated by Tzivya Israel in loving memory of Sarah Bela Bas Avram and Tanchum Ben Shlomo. Sometimes the most obvious questions are the most complex, and sometimes the most complex problems comes down to a very obvious question that is often overlooked. With all the polarization and the fighting and the vitriol and the venom even out there in the media, in the political arenas, on all sides. So everyone talks about how toxic the environment is. Even though we may be addicted to these toxins, and yet we also see something really wrong. But really, what lies at the heart of it? I understand when things become exponentially big, compounded, amplified by technology, where millions and millions of people are involved, we sometimes lose sight of the core issue at hand. So I think if you want to talk about arguments in general, let's bring it back home. What that means is when you disagree with somebody, someone in your community, in your home, on your block, at work, what is the essence of a disagreement? So we'd like to believe, in the purest of intentions, that a disagreement is two people have different opinions about something. They could be informed opinions, they can be ignorant opinions. Let's even say informed opinions. Based on one person's experience, based on their way of evaluating things, they come to a certain conclusion that this and this candidate is the right person. Or let's stay away from the candidates for a moment. We'll speak on a more, as I said, closer to home, an immediate situation. And the other person has a different way of thinking based on their experience, based on their evaluation. Now, in a healthy environment, each one states their feelings, their thoughts, makes a case for it. The other person listens and responds, may disagree, but you hash it out. Now, for really something very emotional that touches you deeply, it's going to be harder to do so because it's not purely an intellectual pursuit. So, in a healthy situation, you would hope that the conversation will lead maybe to a third conclusion, the best of both worlds. Good discussion, that's what good brainstorming is about. Person brings up an idea, someone has a counter idea. What are the strengths? What are the weaknesses, the pros and the cons? And you come away with a far better approach to things. That's what you like to do with an attorney, where you get a second opinion or a medical opinion. All seems good. And yet we find sometimes arguments that go nowhere. Now, is it simply due to the emotional investment? Or we should add not just the emotional investment, the ego, our pride. I don't want to be wrong. So even if I hear a good argument, I dismiss it. I may dismiss the person altogether. It's easier to do it that way instead of considering it. So sometimes our egos get in the way. But what's wrong with a healthy ego hearing another opinion? You know what's wrong? Because we're insecure. And if there's insecurity at the heart of it, then an insecure person does not want to feel wrong. They don't want to feel that they lost. A very secure person will not have a problem hearing another opinion in most cases. Now, we're all emotional, we're all subjective, we all can be prejudiced and biased, and I think we have to all admit that, which is all part of saying, no, we're not totally objective, but at least admitting that you're subjective is already on a path toward objectivity. Like awareness is half the solution. Awareness of a problem. Now multiply this and amplify this millionfold with millions of people on social media or other forms of media in a political scenario, and you get yourself what's called mob mentality, herd mentality. Now it's no longer two individuals. Now it's become an approach. This is a way of looking at life. And if you don't look at it the way we look at it, our group, and it's a self-reinforcing echo chamber, then something's wrong with you. I especially brought it back to two individuals because there we can isolate it. Like in science, you always want to isolate things. Two individuals, so then you can, if you're dealing with 2 million people, 1 million people on this side, 1 million people, it's so loud, the noise, it's impossible to isolate and get to the root of the issue. So many ways you can say it comes down to emotional subjectivity, ego, and insecurity. That lies at the heart of being unable to resolve a real problem. This is not talked about. I've looked articles on the media. Why is no one writing, why is our society so polarized? Why are we so divided? And interestingly, what I'm saying here comes from some texts, biblical texts, and specifically I'm referring to a text in a book called the Tanya, chapter 32. Interesting, 32 in Hebrew is lev. Lev is heart. Lev also can be pronounced love, emotion of love. What is the key to love, he says, is getting beyond your ego, getting beyond your self-interest. As long as self-interest is driving your life, which means what's good for me, which is subjective, but also can include ego and insecurity, it's going to be very difficult to really find some reconciliation with someone that disagrees with you. So the only other option is, instead of reconciliation, is compromise. Two people, they're partners. You know what? I'll compromise a little, you compromise. So both feel a little better. They don't have to give up everything. They both compromise. But it's not really a reconciliation when you compromise, because you feel, hey, I gave in. When is it really possible is when a person gets their ego out of the way, and therefore their subjectivity gets somewhat tamed, somewhat a little lower temperature. That is what's lacking. So the question is, why is our society so insecure? Why is our society so lacking what I often refer to as bittul? Bittul means a type of suspending yourself in the face of something greater. And that's the answer. What is greater than my own interest? At the end of the day, we're all going to worship something. You're either going to worship yourself or you're going to worship something greater than yourself. So it comes down to that selflessness is not just a humble person, not just somebody that is passive, somebody that is not ready to fight, someone's not aggressive, which of course is seen as weakness in our society. You know what it comes down to? It's someone that is actually very strong. They don't worship themselves. They don't take themselves so seriously. They're looking for something greater than themselves. But you have to have a transcendent side to yourself, as he explains in that chapter so beautifully. Transcendence is the secret to unity. And self-interest is the secret to divisiveness. It doesn't mean everyone that's self-interest driven is going to be divisive all the time. But it's the root of it. Because it's one step away. Because as soon as my self-interest is in conflict with yours, or I feel you're taking something from me, or I feel that you are somewhat undermining my credibility or my validity, you may not become violent, but you're definitely going to become more aggressive. And therefore creates a climate of tension and a climate of inability to communicate. I remember I was invited once to one of the major cable networks. I don't even know if we call them cable anymore, but on there, and it was about a topic that was an issue in New York City, and they wanted me to take the position that the mayor of the city, I think it was de Blasio at the time, was anti-Semitic. And they asked me, will I say that on the air? I said, I don't know the man. I'm not ready to call someone an anti-Semite. I could say if you ask me a situation, I could say it sounds like an anti-Semitic behavior, but that doesn't mean the person is an anti-Semite, But they said, we don't want you just to say that it's an anti-Semite, we want you to yell about it. Are you ready to yell? Because you're going to have someone else who's going to have a very different position. They actually wanted me to yell. So I said, it's not my style. I'll be firm. I'll be strong about my opinion. I will not be what's the word I want to use? A wimp. They'll step over me. I'll have my position, but I'm not a yeller. I like to persuade through conversation, through discussion, through a more appealing, more emotional appeal, and so on. They wanted me to yell, and they didn't book me. At the end of the day, on the record, I said to the producer, so you want gladiators, you want blood. They say, well, that's what today TV is about. They want blood, yes. They want two people to argue in a way that will excite the audience, titillate the audience. So this is part of the problem, not part of the solution, obviously. But that's what it's come down to. So I go back to what I was saying. What requires here is not just a civil tone, that you've heard many articles, that we need civility, be a mensch type of thing. That goes without saying. But how do you become a mensch? You become a mensch when you stop worshiping yourself and everything you believe in. You're open to hear another idea. And even if you don't agree with it, you understand this person may have an idea, may come from a very misinformed place. And unfortunately, we see that. Trust me, my blood boils when I hear certain narratives out there that I know are completely false. The question is how to deal with it. And obviously, if I'm talking to someone who's a Nazi and wants to destroy me, so then I will not engage in a conversation of bittul and transcendence and so on, because you're dealing with a person who's ready to kill you. Now, of course, they'll say the same, that I'm ready to kill them. So we get back to the polarized state. But let's be honest, we're intelligent people. And I think if there's intelligence involved and not an agenda, we can get to a place like that. So I think what's lacking, the ingredient that is so lacking in our society, is not something that can be easily repaired. You don't just make a statement or write an article. It becomes so ingrained in our society, in our schools, in our homes, that it's created a natural polarization simply due to the fact that unless you're secure in your own skin, you're not really going to be able to deal with another person and their opinions. And that's a major, major problem. To get the ego out of the way, to get people to even admit that. I see certain positions people have, no matter what, they will always maintain their position. And if something proves them wrong, they won't say they're wrong. They'll say that the person who's proving them, something's wrong with them. If somebody, for example, will move from becoming a Democrat to a Republican, some of the diehards will say something's wrong with them. They'll never say maybe they reconsidered and they discovered that the ideology is more appealing to them. Maybe it's more legitimate for them. No, they can't even give that right. A person can change a position. Hopefully the other way around is also a problem, obviously. Meaning the inability. Your position, fine, you're stuck in your position. Whether you admit that you're stuck or not, it's your thing. But to allow somebody to have the right to maybe I reconsidered, maybe I listened to a different approach and I discovered something? No, there's something wrong. So it comes back to, yes, a lack of selflessness. Now, selflessness is not just I'm selfless and therefore kind and compassionate and flexible. It means because you're connected to something greater than yourself, a cause that's greater. I can assure you, with all the polls out there, take a poll. Are you connected to something greater than yourself? And those that answer no, or don't know what they're connected to, I assure you, they're going to be more difficult for them to have an argument, a civil argument with another person in a way that both people can learn from it. It's in direct proportion. If you don't have something greater than yourself, then you're the one that's the greatest. Then you are the greatest. I remember when I think it was Sam Harris, one of our classic radical atheists, wrote the book God is Not Great. I believe that was the name of the book. Was it him or was Christopher Hitchens? One of them. So I remember I was going to write another article. I never ended up writing it. But if God is not great, then I am great. The point of God being great is not that because God is great, some almighty God in heaven. It means that something greater than you are. That's the point. And the alternative is that I become God. And once you're God, especially if you're insecure, imagine an insecure God, then we have ourselves a real lethal combination. So my friends, think about it. It's an idea I think worth sharing. It's an idea worth spreading. And hopefully, if it does spread properly, it can help us rethink ourselves, our lives, and start looking at ourselves instead of looking at someone else. Because that's the real sign of an intelligent person. It's not about you don't have to be wrong for me to be right. I want to learn from you. Even if I disagree with you, I want to learn from you. That's what a wise person does. You learn why you disagree. Maybe there's legitimacy to some of your argument, even if not all of it. And we all grow through the process. So hopefully that can help us bring a little more United States. And I think, yes, when the Founding Fathers founded the country, because they were under duress, the challenges of King George of Great Britain and its dominance and its aggression. So it caused them to crystallize their values. They didn't have that comfort and leisure to sit on their couches and let's talk about who I'm going to demonstrate against. So they had that sense of urgency. As Warren Buffett likes to say, that until the tide is out, you don't know who's been swimming naked. So when you're swimming naked, you're forced to really figure out what you really stand for and your values. And that causes them to be crystallized in a way that we recognize values that are greater than ourselves. The truths that are self-evident, that all people are created equal. We're all created in the divine image and endowed by the Creator with unalienable rights. Recognize not just you have those rights, the other person across you also has them, all in the divine image. And when we recognize that, we come to realize that we're all indispensable notes in a larger cosmic composition. Thank you so much. This has been Simon Jacobson, Meaningful Live. Please check out all our offerings, subscribe to them, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please share, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, feedback, comments, rebuttals, and arguments. And hopefully we all can learn from them.